Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little interesting video, at least that ended up piquing my interest. And of course, this is going to be the video by Mr. Dante's Vaccination. And of course, what we know about Mr. Dante's Vaccination is that he is a part of the new media role. And the new media role, of course, they have their own agendas. And of course, one of those agendas overall is to tear down Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. But in this video, what I'll at least give him credit for is that he did somewhat stick to his same energy and somewhat stick to overall his same narrative of DMITRY BIVOL, because of course that recent news has been announced that Mr. Canelo Alvarez and DMITRY BIVOL, a fight at 175, that is going to happen, and overall that Canelo Alvarez will be facing DMITRY BIVOL, I believe, on the date of May 7th. At least Dante, to a certain degree in this video, said that this is still going to be a very tough fight. You can tell that he's somewhat trying to change his energy a little bit in this video. But at the end of the day, the reason why I thought that I would review this video is because I just thought that I would talk a little bit more about, in my opinion, what a win over DMITRY BIVOL would do for Canelo Alvarez's career, and I don't know what this fight means, in my view, to Canelo Alvarez. Because I don't think a lot of people really realize how great of a fighter DMITRY BIVOL really is. When I say that, I truly believe that DMITRY BIVOL is a better all-around fighter than David Benavidez or Charlo or Andrade or any of those fighters. I think that he is. And on top of that, he's bigger and stronger and faster than any of those guys, probably, at the least. So, like I said, this fight is not going to be easy for Mr. Canelo Alvarez. This is a fight that could be very potentially dangerous. And like I said, if Canelo is able to get a win over him, in my opinion, it'll be another very decent win on his resume. It'll be a great win on his resume. But anyways, Dante's Vaccination, he's going to talk about it. Let's tune in. Let's see what he has to say.
Dante's Vaccination, what's going on, guys? So some really big news. It is finally official. The fight we expected was going to take place is happening. Canelo Alvarez, he will face DMITRY BIVOL at 175. This is a big fight for Canelo Alvarez. This is a major step up in competition from all of the guys that he fought at 168. And on top of it, he signed a multi-fight deal.
Well, I think that it's a step up, but the reason why it's a step up is because I don't think that Caleb Plant or Billy Joe Saunders or Callum Smith, I don't think that those guys were ever bad fighters. I just think that DMITRY BIVOL, not only is he naturally bigger than those guys, but on top of that, he's decently more athletic than any of those guys, and on top of that, he's a better boxer than those guys. It's no offense against Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, and Callum Smith. I do think that they're A-grade opponents, maybe on the A- level to A-grade level. Like I said, in my opinion, they're kind of on that same level as a Charlo. But when it comes down to, like I said, when it comes to DMITRY BIVOL, he's someone that is in a completely different league. You can actually even debate that DMITRY BIVOL, in terms of his skill set, in my view, is an A-plus fighter. That's how skilled I believe DMITRY BIVOL is. So if Canelo is somehow able to pull out the victory here, especially when DMITRY BIVOL is naturally bigger in size and stature, and if Canelo somehow is able to put on a dominant performance, but even if he's able to get the victory, that'll attest overall to his greatness, in my view, no doubt about it.
With Eddie Hearn in Matchroom, they still haven't made the Golovkin fight official, and I think it's for a couple different reasons. I wonder if, Gennady Golovkin wants to maybe take a fight at 168 first and get acclimated to the weight, or it could have something to do with money, or all of the above. But this won't be the first time that Gennady Golovkin has actually turned down a fight with Canelo Alvarez.
Gennady Golovkin, apparently, for that fight to happen, he is going to have to unify the belts, I believe, against Mr. Ryota Murata. I've not really seen much of Ryota Murata, but I've never been overly impressed with him. Maybe I would have to watch him a little bit more, but more than likely, Gennady Golovkin, even at this point in time in his career, he probably would win that fight. But we'll see all in all what happens.
Matter of fact, before they had their second fight, Golden Boy had offered Golovkin a fight, and he turned it down. But a couple months later, or at least a fight later, he finally agreed to the terms, and they had their rematch. So I assume the same thing is going to happen in this situation. Now, what this news does mean is, because of the way this multi-fight deal is structured, the reports are Canelo Alvarez, if he were to get past Bivol, which will not be easy, he then goes after Golovkin. Then if he gets past Golovkin, he gets to fight either Makabu or John Ryder. So it's kind of playing out the exact way I told you guys I thought it would play.
In my view, if Canelo Alvarez does have a third fight for the year, I think more than likely that he should go after Ulunga Makabu, because I think that that would be a great fight for his legacy, just in terms of winning a title at a fifth weight class and being one of the only fighters in history to win belts from 154 to cruiserweight. There's not going to be a lot of people that are going to be able to do that in their career. So I would actually love to see the Canelo Alvarez versus Ilunga Makabu fight. I'm not really sure how well Canelo would handle some of the other cruiserweights just because they might be a little bit too big. But, and on top of that, a little bit too skilled, for their size when it comes down to it. That's not me saying that Canelo is not as skilled as them, of course. But Canelo, in my view, is debatably the most skilled fighter on the planet in terms of boxing. But when it comes down to it, I just don't know how you would handle necessarily a Michael Okoli or whatever his name is, or an Alexander Usyk or someone of that sort. So, Canelo, when it comes down to it, I think Ilunga Makabu, I think that that's a fair enough fight overall for him if he were to go up the cruiserweight.
Yeah. I always figured that the negotiations part was Canelo's team wanting to include Makabu in the multi-fight deal. Just like he requested to have the Yildirim fight included in his multi-fight deal when he fought against Caleb Smith. Now, while this fight is going to be a very, very difficult fight for Canelo Alvarez, clearly, Canelo, he feels that it's the easier fight than a Benavidez or a Charlo fight. What's really interesting, or what all this news tells us, is Canelo.
And you can already tell that Dante is trying to flip the switch. You can already tell that when it comes down to it, that he basically is trying to somewhat flip the narrative. That eventually he is going to go into the mode of saying, oh, well, Jamal Charlo and Benavidez, they're bigger threats and blah, blah, blah. No, they're not. And the question is, Dante, what do you truly believe? Do you believe that DMITRY BIVOL is the better fighter? Or do you believe all in all that Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez are more dangerous because you can't seem to make up your mind?
Alvarez, he has no plans of fighting either Benavidez or Charlo anytime soon because of the fact that he already has plans after getting past Bivol, if he gets past Bivol. It doesn't include them. Once again, the plan is Bivol, Golovkin, and either Makabu or John Ryder. By that time, Andrade and Benavidez would have already fought each other and unified the belts at 168. So things are going to get really, really interesting. But I'm telling you guys right now, man, it's going to be really, really hard for Canelo to win this Bivol fight, which I believe if Canelo wins this fight, it puts him in the top 5 when it comes to pound for pound, one of the best fighters in the world.
No, what this win does for Canelo Alvarez, in my view, if he's able to get the victory over DMITRY BIVOL, what it does for his career is that more than likely it puts an even bigger nail in the coffin that he is clearly the number one pound for pound fighter. Because what other fighter is doing what he's doing? Now, the only fighters, in my view, that maybe would have a debate for the number one pound for pound spot if they were even able to pull off these victories would either be Alexander Usyk if he were able to beat Tyson Fury, or who knows, maybe there might be some people that rank Tyson Fury as a number one pound for pound fighter if he's able to beat Dillian White and Alexander Usyk, who knows, and then maybe later on Anthony Joshua, or maybe a Terrence Bud Crawford if he's able to dominantly beat that of an Errol Spence Jr. But I really don't know overall how much at a great point Errol Spence is at this point in time in his career. That's not me saying that he's not a top 5 pound for pound fighter, because I believe that he is. But when I take a look at Errol Spence Jr., do I see the same fighter that I seen from a few years ago? I'm not so sure about that, but I do think that he still is a very great fighter. So if Terrence Bud Crawford were able to go in the ring with Errol Spence Jr. and he was able to dominate him, clearly, kind of like, compared to what Canelo, when he had those 2 tough fights with Gennady Triple G Golovkin, when he was in the ring with the top 5 pound for pound fighter, then I certainly would understand the argument of Terrence Bud Crawford being over Canelo Alvarez. But Canelo is not already top 5 pound for pound. He is the number 1 pound for pound. It just is what it is. And at the least, even within these next few years, no matter what transpires, he's going to be at least probably number 2 or number 3, even at the least. More than likely, still remaining number 1. But we'll see what happens.
Once again, we're talking about getting a win with no controversy, no robbery, no situation where it looked...
Right, but come on, Dante, that's not really that fair. Because you can claim that overall with a lot of fighters. We can claim that overall with Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez, which, I mean, you like to do it with that fighter because Manny Pacquiao, of course, ain't a black fighter. But when it comes to other fighters that, many other people thought they lost, a lot of people thought Floyd Mayweather Jr. lost both, Jose Luis Castillo fights. Does that mean that they're correct? Does that mean that, Floyd clearly lost those fights? Now, it's been a while since I watched those fights. I can't really tell you. But there's a lot of people overall that think Floyd lost those fights. So is that me saying, well, you know what, Floyd, he can't really be remembered as great as what people remember him to be because, there were certain fights that were controversial. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just overall a card that I'm not willing to pull. Unless overall it was such a clear robbery to where the scorecards were so goddamn off to where, when it comes on it, and maybe you can argue that with the first Gennady Golovkin fight, but in the second one, Canelo Alvarez was able to beat him, in my view. Overall was a very, very close fight, and I'm sorry, but a close fight when it comes down to it is different than a robbery. So it is what it is. So Canelo, I'm sorry, but there was not much controversy with the Golovkin rematch. There was a lot of controversy in the first one, but when it comes down to it, no, you can't just pull that card unless there's a fighter out there that is defeating a top 5 pound for pound fighter in extreme dominant fashion. So whether it be a Usyk or a Fury or, a Terrence Bud Crawford or Errol Spence Jr., if one of those guys gets a hold of a top 5 pound for pound fighter and dominates them clearly to where the fight is not even close, then maybe overall you can, argue them over Canelo Alvarez. But even then, in my view, it's going to be very hard because Canelo Alvarez is a 4-weight division champion. And this win over DMITRY BIVOL, it would do wonders for his career, in my opinion. Because DMITRY BIVOL, he, in my opinion, is one of the top 20 pound-for-pound fighters in the world.
Like, Bivol completely won 9 rounds out of 3, and they gave it to Canelo. Those type of wins don't...
Yeah, but come on. What fight has there been there overall like that with the Canelo Alvarez? There's been no fighter overall that has ever beat Canelo Alvarez 9 rounds overall, and he's just ended up getting the decision. Like, come on. The 2 fights that ended up being somewhat controversial on Canelo Alvarez's resume was the Yarosani Lara fight, which was a fight that you could have, argued either way when it came down to it. And then the other one was against Gennady Golovkin the first time around, which Dante has always stated multiple times that, depending on who he's trying to tear down, one day he'll say that he thought Canelo won, the other day he'll say that he thought Gennady Golovkin won, depending on who he wants to tear down. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, I personally thought Gennady Golovkin clearly should have won the fight. But at the end of the day, Canelo was able to pull out of the rematch. So I give Canelo Alvarez a lot of props.
Count when it comes to impressive wins on your resume. So if we're looking at it with no controversy, if Canelo were to win this fight, this would be the most impressive win of his career. We'll see how it plays out. Canelo's going to have a lot of problems with Bivol. And, we're going to see how Bivol is going to deal with the body shots if Canelo could even get close enough to land body shots. But outside of the body shots, Bivol has one of the best jabs in the business. He has a great jab. His foot movement is almost as impressive as Lomachenko's foot movement. His accuracy...
I'm not sure if I would go as far to call his footwork Lomachenko-like, because Lomachenko has some of the best feet that I've ever seen, but DMITRY BIVOL has excellent feet for his size. He overall has some of the best footwork that I've seen for a man of his size. No doubt about it. He certainly has better footwork than that of a Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez. No doubt about it. He also has more power than those guys. More athleticism. And on top of that, he's more skilled. So that's why, in my opinion, DMITRY BIVOL, he's a person that, he's nothing to mess around with.
He doesn't waste punches. He knows how to smother a fighter when they try to go on the inside, push them off. He's a very intelligent fighter. And the fact that Caleb Plant was able to outbox Canelo, BJ Saunders, Sergey Kovalev, Amir Khan, they were all...
Well, all these guys, when it comes down to it, they were able to get Canelo Alvarez in certain rounds. But there's a difference between winning some rounds, Dante, and being completely embarrassed for the majority of the fight, and then just eventually knocking them out. Like I said, Dante always tries to act like Canelo Alvarez is some Deontay Wilder or some shit, to where Deontay Wilder in certain fights, he'll be actually getting outboxed, by like a Luis Ortiz, but then, he eventually just later on goes to get the knockout. Like, that's not what goes on here. Canelo, when it comes down to it, yeah, sure, he might get, outboxed in certain rounds, or he may lose certain rounds. There was a person, I believe, yesterday that asked me what was my scorecard in the Caleb Plant versus Canelo Alvarez fight. I think I had Caleb Plant for sure winning 3 rounds, but then maybe you could have put a 4th in there. But the majority of the time, I thought Canelo Alvarez was getting to him. I thought that the pressure was getting to him. I thought more than likely that he was eventually going to break him down. Caleb Plant was not getting off the ropes, in my opinion, enough. And in the Billy Joe Saunders fight, before that fight ended, I thought Billy gave it a great effort. I thought that he won maybe 3 rounds, but I thought Canelo was winning the fight. And in the Sergey Kovalev fight, Sergey was giving it a great effort. It was competitive, but I thought that Canelo, by the end of the fight, I thought that he was winning by a couple of rounds because I just didn't think that Sergey Kovalev was really landing with enough impactful punches. And you could tell that he was afraid overall to throw certain punches down the pipe like that right cross because he knew that Canelo Alvarez was setting him up for counters. So all those fights, yeah, Canelo was, you can argue that he lost rounds, but that doesn't mean that he was losing the fight. Like, come on.
Able to outbox Canelo in multiple rounds in the fight. If they could outbox him, well, Bivol is on a whole nother level. So that's why it's going to be really, really interesting to see how this fight plays out. Canelo Alvarez most likely has to knock out Bivol to even win the fight. Because I can't see Canelo Alvarez winning rounds against Bivol. Certainly not the majority of the rounds. Let's see how it plays out. Once again, for me, this is great news. Whenever Canelo Alvarez is not fighting against C-level fighters that have no chance, it's great news.
Right, but the majority of the time, Canelo is not facing C-grade fighters anyway. The only C-grade fighters that Canelo has fought as of recently have either been that of Rocky Fielding or Avni Yildirim. Those have been the only C-grade fighters that he's fought. Every other fighter has been on a very decent level.
This is a real fight. He is really in there with an opponent that has a hell of a chance of pulling off the upset. But something else that's really telling is you notice Canelo, he's not moving at 175 the same way he moved at 168. When it came to 168, he wanted to unify all of the belts immediately. He wanted to fight all of the champions immediately. It didn't matter if they fought for PBC, if they fought for ESPN, he was going to do whatever it took to make those fights. But now
Well, I believe that Artur Beterbiev will eventually come. But I think that as for right now, I think that DAZN wanted the DMITRY BIVOL fight and the Gennady Golovkin trilogy. So I think Canelo Alvarez is saying, let me get this out of the way first, and then maybe I can face an Ilunga Macabo at the end of the year, accomplish history there. And then, maybe I can face Artur Beterbiev early on next year or the winner of that fight, which I think more than likely is going to be Artur Beterbiev, but we'll see what happens. That would be a fantastic fight.
175, the plan is not to fight all of the champions back to back to back. Because even though it was Gennady Golovkin, or it was DAZN, I should say, that wanted Canelo to take the third Golovkin fight, Canelo, he could have still said, listen, I'll go ahead and I'll fight Bivol, I'll fight Golovkin, but I also want the winner of Joe Smith and Beterbiev, so I could unify the belts. Canelo could have did that.
Yeah, but doing that within 3 fights within a year is a very, very tough draw. I mean, you're talking about basically the first fight of the year being a 50-50 fight with DMITRY BIVOL, then another fight with Gennady Triple G Golovkin. Now, I don't really think Golovkin is the same fighter that he used to be, but you never know. Golovkin overall still is a champion at this point in time in his career. He's a person that still has great athleticism. He's a person that still has that good boxing IQ on his side. I don't think that more than likely he would beat Canelo in the third fight, but it's still somewhat of a tough fight. I would give Golovkin maybe a 20% chance at the most, but when it comes down to it at the end of the day, you still can't underestimate someone like that. And then, overall, so then basically what that would mean is that Canelo would have to face Artur Beterbiev for a third fight. And that would just be a very, very tough year. So I don't see the Artur Beterbiev fight happening this year. But if it ended up happening next year, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever.
If he wanted to. Or he could have just took the 2-fight deal with Bivol and Golovkin and had a 1-fight deal with Top Rank and ESPN. Let's say if Beterbiev were to win that fight against Joe Smith, right?
And this is the same dude, all in all, that basically said that he didn't mind Jamal Charlo taking the Montiel fight because he was off for 9 months. Could you imagine someone overall facing DMITRY BIVOL, then Gennady Golovkin, then Artur Beterbiev on the same year? Once again, Dante can spread all this bullshit about how he thinks that, Canelo, if he wins DMITRY BIVOL, that puts him in the top 5 pound for pound. He knows damn well that Canelo's number 1 pound for pound because he doesn't put expectations on anyone else's shoulders like that. Could you imagine if Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Boo Andrade, or none of one of these fighters that they try to gas up. And don't get me wrong, that's not me saying that they're not decent fighters. They are. But let's be real, once again, Canelo has a different type of expectation on his shoulders. All right, could you imagine if overall, Jamal Charlo were to face Artur Beterbiev, Gennady Golovkin, and overall Dimitri Bivol all in 1 year? They'd be calling him the number one pound for pound fighter in the whole entire world.
So, but once again, it's always great to see Canelo Alvarez step up in competition. Canelo hasn't stepped up in competition like this in 4 years. The last time he faced...
Well, you can somewhat overall say that this is going to be the biggest challenge of his career ever since Gennady Golovkin, if you wanted to. But still, I don't think Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, or Caleb Plant were bad fighters.
An opponent this dangerous, it was in the Golovkin rematch. So it should be a very, very dramatic fight, to say the least. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys. If you look...
But anyways, that's really about it for today. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. And we'll see where Mr. Soul with Canelo Alvarez goes. But it should be very, very interesting. But anyways, that's all I got for today. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.